Shall we start off by talking about your role as an ambassador? Why did you want to become an ambassador for the Premature Award? So I came across some of those things when I was doing a dissertation, and because I was using my own experiences in the dissertation, it was about the long-term needs of preterm children. So I was doing the research, and I came across the Smallest Things website, and it was such a revelation because I'd not heard of any research that had been done or nothing that was being promoted in schools at that point. So as soon as I found out about the charity, what it does, I knew that I wanted to sign up and become an ambassador because I can use my own experiences. And I'm in a great position as a school nurse to be able to go into schools as well. So yeah, I just wanted to use my own experiences to help others.
I mean, that sounds brilliant. I know that you're in Newham in London. That's your patch, and as an ambassador, so you're approaching schools and you've got big plans. Can you tell us a bit about those?
Sure, yes. So my eventual aim is for every school in Newham to become Prem aware. We've got about 100 schools in Newham. So if we could get Newham and be the first Prem aware borough, that would be amazing. And the schools have been quite receptive to it as well, which is brilliant. Like I said, as a school nurse, I have access to all those schools. So I can just go in and say, this is something that, we're promoting, and would you be interested in it?
So yeah, in terms of long term, I'd like to set up a subgroup within our team focused on the long term needs of premature children, and promoting the PremAware Award as part of that as well. The other thing is we always send out school health entry questionnaires to all parents when their children are starting reception. And as school nurses, we are that link between healthcare and education. That is one of our roles. So if we can identify those children that might be at risk because they were born preterm, it would allow us to give schools a bit more of a heads up. It would allow us to look at their development a bit closer, and it means there's less surprises down the road. So that's also something that I'm pushing for at the moment, is to change our school health entry questionnaire so that it says there's a question on there about was your child born prematurely. So then as healthcare professionals, we can be aware of them as well.
That sounds amazing. I mean, I wish that questionnaire had been around when my premature child was starting school, because that would just have been a really simple way to let them know about premature birth. Now, can you tell me a bit about your career? You initially trained as a teacher, but now you're a school nurse. Do you want to tell us about what inspired your career choices?
Yeah, so I always knew that I wanted to work with children. I've always got on well with children from a young age, probably because I'm quite childish myself. So I find it quite easy to relate to them. And when I was little, I always wanted to be a nurse. So there's lots of pictures of me with my little teddy bears who were my patients, and I was looking after them. But when I got to the age of 18, I was like, I'm not sure if I can handle the emotional side of nursing. And I think that might be too much for me. So I had a friend that was training to be a primary school teacher. She sounded like she was having a great time. So I was like, oh, okay, maybe I'll try primary school teaching, see how that goes. So I qualified as a primary school teacher in 2011. Then I went and moved to Abu Dhabi for about a year as a newly qualified teacher. Right. And then after that, I moved back to London and I started working more in the early years. So I was working in private nurseries as their preschool teacher, which was something I really enjoyed. And it surprised me as well because my role prior to that had always been very focused on the education side of things. But when it was in the nurseries, there was an element of the caring side of things as well. So I was like, yeah, I'm enjoying this. I also started getting quite bored at the weekends because I was a lot younger and I was able to do a lot more things. Yeah. So I started volunteering for St. John Ambulance in 2014 doing first aid events, and I got to work alongside some doctors and nurses, and I was doing a lot of work with them, doing a lot of events every weekend at one point, and I just started really enjoying it so much that it kind of came back to me, the idea of nursing, and I was like, yeah, maybe this is something I should run with. Like, I'm quite a big believer in trusting your gut instincts, and my gut instincts were telling me to go for it. So I applied in July 2015 and I started the course in September 2015. So it was a very last minute sort of thing. But yeah, I got through that. My first job after qualifying as a nurse was in paediatric intensive care.
Okay.
So I worked there for about a year, and it was interesting in a way because we were supporting a lot of babies that had come from NICU and they still needed some intensive care.
Yeah.
So they were too old for NICU, but they were in the PICU. But it started really affecting my mental health at that point because there were children there that were born at the same age as me. Some of them were born younger and they weren't making it. And it was almost like a survivor's guilt sort of thing.
Yeah.
I was like, well, why was I okay? And they're not, even though this is like maybe 25 years later.
Yeah.
So I knew that I wanted to work with children that were well for a while because I needed to step away from the pediatric intensive care side of things. And school nursing I was drawn to it just because it's an element of teaching and healthcare. And I get to use the skills that I've developed in teaching. And yeah, it just seemed like it was going to be a really good job, and it has been so far. So yeah, I've been a school nurse for about 5 years now.
So that was your moment. That was the right time for you to take on that direction.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, that is great to hear. Now, if I could take you right back to the beginning. So as we know, back in 1989, you were born at 24 weeks, making you one of the most premature babies to survive. And we've got a screenshot on camera now. You made the papers. You were that tiny. And sadly, your twin sister, Amanda, didn't survive. She died after a few days. But do you know much about your first few weeks in NICU?
So I know we were both blue lighted to the Rosie in Cambridge at Happy Brooks under police escort because where I was born in Ipswich, they just didn't have the facilities to cope with that. But my mum wasn't allowed to stay there, so she had to make that journey every day with two very little babies, and you know, so it was really overwhelming for her as well. So I think I was 1 pound 8 ounces when I was born. And mum always says that I made a 30 centimetre ruler look like massive compared to me. And yeah, I think the doctors gave me a 4% chance of survival at that point. And that was just surviving, you know, not even in terms of long-term prospects. My mum said she had to live hour by hour, basically. And every hour that I was still alive, basically, was a good hour for her. So yeah, I think I was in NICU for about a month, and there's a photo of me. I couldn't find it to send it to you, but I'm on my side in the incubator and I'm giving like a little thumbs up. And my mum knew, she said she knew that at that point, that was when she knew that I would be okay.
Oh, that's
so yeah. And yeah, after NICU, I think I spent another 3 months back in Ipswich, on the special care baby unit. And then I was well enough to go home.
I mean, gosh, I feel, having been there myself, I am relating to your mum, as I know many people watching will do. That journey to the NICU and watching your baby in an incubator, it's just absolutely terrifying. I wonder if we could go back to growing up a little bit. Did you notice, as you were growing up in your sort of early years and primary school years, any consequences of being in the neonatal intensive care for so long?
Yeah, and I didn't realise it at the time, but there definitely were long-term consequences. I have no conscious memory of any of it, but there were a few things in my childhood that, looking back, I'm like, yeah, that was probably because of the early experiences. So for the longest time, I hated my feet being touched by anyone. And obviously when you're growing up, you need to have your shoes and your school shoes, and you need to get your feet measured for that. I think I got blacklisted from basically every shoe shop in Ipswich because I would suddenly turn from being this like quiet, placid little girl to being an absolute monster who was kicking and screaming and fighting. And yeah, at the time it was just like, oh, she's just being difficult. But now I think it was just because of the amount of heel prick tests that I would have had to have in intensive care. And yeah, I think I just decided by that point, no one's touching my feet. and I've still got some scars on my wrists and hands.
Wow.
That you can see from when they tried to take blood and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, the other thing was wind. I hated the sound of wind as a
Ah.
child, and I was really scared of it. So like when it got quite gusty, I mean, we had like a 2-story house, and my bedroom was on the top. So when it got really gusty, I would just get really scared. And I think that's because I was on like oxygen for quite a while. And I think that maybe that was related to it because the sound would have been quite similar.
Yeah.
And apparently mum says that like when I was well enough just to have like a waft of oxygen with a mask, I just used to turn my face away from it. And they would constantly like having to roll me back over, so that I could still have the oxygen. And then when I actually started working in paediatric intensive care, the other thing was the noise. Like it just hits you. And I think on a subconscious level, my brain was just like, why are we back here? You know?
Yeah.
I know the matrons would come round every day and they'd be like, Nicola, you look really nervous. Are you okay? And I felt really calm at the time. You know, I could have the most stable patient ever that didn't really need a lot of intensive care. And apparently I just still look really nervous. And I think that probably is because subconsciously hearing all those alarms and beeps and all that thing going off.
It stayed with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell us a bit about your time at primary school? You know, we've been hearing about the Premature Award and about difficulties some children born prematurely have when they go to school. Did you have any difficulties at primary school?
I definitely did, yeah. It wasn't really anything that got picked up at the time, just because I don't think schools had much awareness. I mean, this was in the 90s, and I went to quite a small little village school, so they weren't exactly on the front line of educational development. But I remember I really struggled to make friends, and I had friends, but I wouldn't tell you they were my friends. And I think part of me was kind of always searching for that sort of relationship with the twin that I'd lost.
Right.
And I always wanted a friend that could like not replace the twin Amanda, but would be at that sort of similar closeness. And I never really found it in primary school. I got bullied quite a lot as well because I looked a little bit different to the other children. So I got called ugly quite a lot at school. And
kids are mean, aren't
they?
I
know, yeah. And it was things like I was the last in my class to move on to pen. And they only really did that as a sympathy thing because everyone else had already moved on to pen. But my writing was really terrible. We later found out that I had dyspraxia, or developmental coordination disorder, which is probably why I was struggling with everything.
But not back then.
No. So back then, I remember in year 2, my teacher just telling me that I was lazy. And the other thing about not wanting to speak up in class, that was definitely me as well. So I remember again in year 2, the teacher said, if anyone else comes up because their pencil's broken and they want to sharpen the pencil, I'm not going to give it to you. And my pencil broke, so I just sat there and I didn't do any work. And then the teacher was like, why haven't you done your work? So I was like, well, it didn't go up. So I just kind of sat there. I was very quiet. I did have a brilliant teacher actually in year 3. I can still remember Alison Chester. And she was one of the first people who she actually looked at beyond all the things that I couldn't do. And she kind of saw the potential of what I could do.
Okay.
And she almost took me under her wing in a way. And like, she was the first person to really advocate for me. And I think she was definitely one of my inspirations for wanting to become a teacher myself as well. We also had the same date of birth. So it was, we were like little friends basically. And she was like my biggest fan in a way at school when most people would just ignore me. So I think I really needed that at the time.
So we need to all be more Mrs. Chester.
Yeah.
We need more of her. Yeah. Oh, amazing.
So one of the things she did, I was always good at English. Hated maths, which I've later found out is very common.
Yes.
But couldn't do maths at all, but I loved English. And she actually submitted a poem that I'd written to be published in like a book of poems from school children in Suffolk. Yeah. And I remember I hadn't even done what like the class had been told to do. I kind of just went a bit rogue and did my own thing.
Love it.
But she was like, yeah, I'm going to submit it because it's really good. So that like made me feel really proud. But yeah, things like PE, art, I really struggled with as well, because I felt like I had all these ideas in my head and I just couldn't get them onto the paper. So I used to get really frustrated. And apparently, I don't remember this, but my mum told me once I got so frustrated at not being able to do it, I just went round and scribbled on everyone else's work and ruined theirs as well.
But that is that frustration, isn't it?
Yeah.
Of not being able to get out what's in your head.
It was just that way of expressing it. So apologies to anyone that, might have done £1 million painting at that time, but yeah.
And what about secondary school? Obviously, you moved on from primary school. Was it any different for you? Because, you must have done well. You passed your exams, right, to train as a teacher.
I did,
Is it different?
yeah. So in secondary school, I just kind of faded into the background, really.
Right.
And to be honest, I was fine with that at the time.
Yep.
I was very quiet. I was very shy. Didn't really interact much with the teachers. I did enough work to pass. And yeah, I passed my GCSEs. I didn't do amazingly in them, but I got the grades that I needed to get into university. I also didn't revise for my exams at all because I really struggled with concentration and like creating a revision plan. All that kind of thing was just beyond me at that point. So I just kind of went in with them. And yeah, I did averagely, but I always think a C for me is probably more like an A for, yeah. So yeah, I'm proud of the results that I got. And
well, it clearly hasn't held you back being born prematurely. Hasn't held you back in your amazing achievements and career. And I totally understand why you're now sort of getting those schools to become aware. But looking back, how do you feel about the experience? Is there anything you wish those schools had known or done differently with the benefit of hindsight and all of the research we've been hearing about?
Absolutely, yeah. I wish there had been more awareness of the long-term needs of premature children at that time, because we're not lazy. We're not doing things because we're trying to be difficult. It's something, it's a medical thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, to be labelled as lazy and stuff can be really, really damaging. And just to acknowledge it as well. So I remember it wasn't at school, but when I was at university, I was finding things a bit difficult. So I went to the head of welfare, and hadn't really asked for that sort of help before. So when she said, what's happened to you? I went right back to the start and I was like, well, I was born premature and I did this and this happened and then this happened and then this happened. And she was quite dismissive of that. And then a few months later, the same woman was giving a lecture to us as training teachers about her pastoral role. And she actually said, people come to me with all sorts of silly things like, I was born a premature baby. She didn't know that I was sitting in the audience. But I can always remember just feeling so ashamed and so small because everyone was laughing and I was like, hang on a minute. And it turns out, it is, it's not, it has been affecting me. So
absolutely.
I am actually tempted to send her some of the research that's been coming out. Yeah. Actually, who was right about that? So.
Well, this is why the work you're doing as an ambassador, we're doing as a charity, is so important to get that awareness into schools.
Yeah.
So last question, there's going to be people watching now who've had premature babies like me, and they might be worried about their children's education and future. What would you say to those parents and carers?
So I'd say be the advocate for your child because you know them best. And if you feel that they need extra support, then don't be scared to fight for that support. Hopefully we'll be on the sidelines educating the schools and getting that awareness. But yeah, obviously parents are the ones that know their children best. And just be proud of everything that your children achieve, because even what seems like a very small milestone to a term baby can be something really significant for someone that's been born preterm. So yeah, just be proud of them as well.